Thank you for joining us for our presentation today. Win Calgar is if you see the slide there, he's more than just a dumpster diver extraordinaire. He's becoming a data guru when it comes to trash. Now, my office that used to be in downtown LA is over near, Dodger Stadium, the Staples Center. And you think there's a lot of trash talk there? No, it was in my cubicle when Win used to call me and just wanted to talk about trash and monitoring and modeling and all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, that doesn't exist yet, Win. You got to make it. That's not there. People are dreaming of that stuff. He's making it a reality, and I'm really proud to highlight the work that he's doing. Right now he's finishing up his dissertation. He's an NSF fellow. He's doing just fantastic work. So Win, thank you for this presentation. Thank you for taking time out of your extremely busy schedule right now to share with us all things trash data. Take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. You reminded me, I was actually reflecting on that just today. Like before I even started my graduate education, I was talking with you about these ideas and now we've come full circle and now we're disseminating them out. And so this is really exciting. So yeah, I'm Win. I'm a PhD candidate at UC Riverside. I'm in Andrew Gray's lab and I study trash. I call myself a trash data junkie. You can see me here in a big pile of trash. This is my natural habitat. This is where I prefer to hang out. And really one of my favorite things about being in trash is that sometimes you find treasure. And that's what I'll be talking about today is that in trash data, there's a lot of buried treasure. And I've been spending, my entire PhD trying to figure out how we can get the most treasure out of the trash data that we have. Many of the projects that I'm working on, it's like 10 co-authors on the projects with many acknowledgments. These are huge efforts, huge undertakings, and the people that I work with are really passionate and driven and work hard to make these projects a reality. So I'm really excited to share on behalf of them as well. And where a lot of this inspiration happens for these projects is at trash datathons. There have been 4 in the past throughout California. And I really encourage you to keep an eye out for these trash datathons if you're interested in getting involved more in trash data. This is really where the inspiration and action starts to develop. And I've been a part of all the ones in the past, and hopefully we'll have a 2022 coming up. And when I think about data, I think there are at least 3 steps that are really important whenever you're using data. The first one is that you need to get some data. The second one is you want to visualize the data to take a look at it. And then the third one is that you want to interpret the data. What does it mean? And so I've created several projects as parts to try to address these steps for trash data. The first one that I want to talk about is called the Trash Data Treasure Trove. This is a labor of love for this project is my longest going project. It is a database full of pretty much any trash data set that I've found that I thought was interesting. I try to curate metadata on these data sets. And during the trash datathons, we've had a lot of discussion about how we can make this database a lot easier to navigate so that people can find data that's going to be most useful for them. You don't always have to collect your own data. Sometimes somebody else has already collected it for you, and this database, the purpose of this is to help people find the data that's already been collected out there. There's one use case that's already happened with this. An undergraduate had dug into this database and used some of the data for their undergraduate thesis at Syracuse University. And you can be involved. I'll be sharing different ways you can be involved with any of these projects because they're all open source and open science. You can be involved with this project by sharing data, helping us to curate metadata, using the data in your own projects. I would, if you want to be a contributor, you can have full access to controlling this database even. So please get in touch if that's of interest to you. Let's see how okay. All right, the second one, so now we're moving on to visualizing trash data. And one of the challenges with visualizing trash data is that the data sets get really large, like millions of data points. And once you start talking in the millions of data points number, all of your computer programs that are, like Excel and stuff like that start to break down. They're like, I can't handle that much data. And so we developed a software for visualizing millions of data points, millions of trash data points called Clean Up Our World. And we published a couple of papers on that. It's an open source software. It's been used in the World Waste Platform, run by Let's Do It World. They're using that database to try to, that software to visualize millions of data points around the world to look at trash, look at the problem of trash globally. And another project, actually, I'm not affiliated very closely with this project, but I have contributed data to this project, and I think it's a very admirable project. It's called Open Litter Map. It's an open source project as well, so you can grab all of their source code and do the same types of visualizations that you're seeing here. Their goal is to open up litter data for the world, and they have a phone application, and you just basically submit photos of trash that are geotagged, and then they'll plot it around the world for you. And so this is going to be a little bit of a non-traditional talk because I want to pause. I'm going through a lot of different projects, and I don't want it to get kind of lost once we get to the end because there's about like 6 or 7 that I'll be going through. So I'm going to pause here and then one other place before we get to the end to just ask questions from the audience, ask if there are questions from the audience, and also ask 2 very specific questions of the audience. Where do you currently get trash data? And how do you sort through it to find the data that you need? You can also ask questions if you have questions about those 3 previous projects now.
You can unmute your phone and ask the question directly, or send the question in via the chat box.
Yeah. Yeah, I should have let people know about this in advance, like in the beginning of the presentation, so that they'd be prepared right now. So they're all like, "Oh man, I got a lot of questions, but I got to jot them down." So I'll give everybody a minute. That's totally cool.
Now, one of the things that often comes up in these discussions is how much recyclable material is being found in the trash we're picking up. Maybe that's something that you could share with us a solution for.
How much recyclable material is there? Yeah, that is a really big question. And actually, Cal Recycle has asked me if I could answer that question. And the challenge is that there's a difference between recyclable and recycled. And typically what people really want to know is the recycled question, but it's really a messy challenge because you might be able to say, yeah, a Coca-Cola bottle should be recyclable, but whether or not it's able to get recycled, it could be, if it's contaminated with different chemicals or something, it wouldn't be able to get recycled. So you have some uncertainty there. And then the waste infrastructure for recycling around the state is very heterogeneous. It's not just, in Riverside, what I can recycle here is going to be exactly the same as what I can recycle in some rural community in the Coachella Valley, for example. So yeah, it's a really hard one. We've tried to answer that just by basically ticking off what we think generally is recyclable, like highly recyclable items, and then looking to like the Ocean Conservancy data set for Coastal Cleanup Day, which I know y'all will be talking about at a later presentation. And looking at, okay, well, in the trash that we're seeing in the environment, what could be recycled? I see some questions rolling in to the chat. This one's from Sarah Nichols. Texas here, we get our data from affiliate groups from all across the state that are working on volunteer cleanups. We often don't get any type of data we need, so we are creating a new database. sampling protocols and trying to get down to the nitty-gritty of what's being cleaned up so we can create education policy and programs around these items. Awesome. Please let me know when you start creating this new database. I'd love to add it to my treasure trove. Lake County Water Resources receives estimates from Public Services and Public Works Department. Generally only get general trash data if we're doing volunteer cleanups. We do not have great records of data for trash. Yeah, that's definitely the reality across the state. It continues to be that it's really hard to keep records of data on trash. And I'll get into some of the solutions we have to that. So California Bay Area, they get some information from local nonprofits that input information into the Zero Litter website. I've heard of that one. That's a really good one. Thank you for sharing that. Great. Thank you. There will be time at the end too. So if you have some other additional questions or come up with something else from this, feel free to jump in at the end. We'll get back to it. All right. So like comments were coming in through the chat, it's really hard to keep records on trash data. And one of the challenges is that we have these really heterogeneous data sets. So some groups are collecting data on, let's say, the number of utensils that they see in the environment. And another group is collecting data on the number of forks, knives, and spoons that they see in the environment. And you could imagine that if you add up the number of forks, knives, and spoons, you get the number of utensils. That's called a hierarchical relationship between those data sets. Also, you have different words like bottle, bottles. Those aren't the same word, but they mean the same thing. And what this trash taxonomy does is tries to define all of those relationships between trash data sets. So far, we have incorporated 69 data sets on trash. And we're able to merge all of them into one harmonized framework so that you could make sense out of 69 different data sets. And hopefully as time goes on, we will continue to get better at this and hopefully we'll be able to encompass all of the trash data that's out there, or at least most of it, and merge it into this harmonized framework. And so it's always really hard for me to articulate the applications of the trash taxonomy because there are just so many different applications. And but basically it is a relational database, so it's a very basic level of database architecture. And on this website you can download the tables. They define the different alias relationships and hierarchy relationships that we've found within the data sets. And you can use those in your own litter data analysis routines and for database management. And one use case that we already have for this is the Marine Debris Tracker app, which has, I don't know, over 20 different trash surveys in their database, trash survey lists. They're using the trash taxonomy to merge all of their data sets right now. And you can get involved too by using these reference tables, expanding them, developing new query tools, stuff like that. And we have been really diving into the new types of statistics that can be done with these kind of tools. And this is basically a hierarchical pie chart. So it tells you, all right, let's say this is one trash survey, and they found 56% of the trash they found was plastic, 37% was organic. But within that organic class, there's also more specific words being used. So paper is the more specific word that was used in that survey. Our hierarchy just says paper could also be lumped into an organic class. And I think that this is really powerful. This is kind of still at experimental phases. We're also doing bootstrapping within these hierarchical pie charts so that we can interpret whether or not these differences are significant. So like, is there significantly more organic matter being seen across these surveys than foam? We can bootstrap those proportions and and get a range of likely proportions from our data set. So really cool stuff. Then the next thing we've done is, so we had a hypothesis that trash survey, that there's certain types of trash surveys. Like there's a marine trash survey, and there's a riverine trash survey. There's a government trash survey. There's a nonprofit trash survey. And we wanted to see if those survey types were actually statistically different from one another. Like how different are they? Can we actually separate out and be like, marine surveys are always going to be different than river surveys? And right now, there's very little separation between these types of categories, which means that as long as you're using one of the more like larger trash surveys out there, they're probably going to be similarly comparable to the other trash survey sets. You don't need to worry so much about like, well, this survey is a marine survey, not an inland survey. That's not as important in terms of like what categories are actually being used in those surveys. All right, switching gears a little bit to computer vision. This is a task that is really important as we have these new applications, cell phone applications that people are using to collect data on trash. They're basically going around during their surveys and just taking photos of trash. And then after you take all those photos, you go through and categorize, okay, there were 2 cigarette butts in the photo, 1 Coca-Cola bottle. And with computer vision, we take out that whole next step. So the computer vision, the goal with that is so that when we're logging our data with these kind of imaging methods, we can just get a table from the images. The computer vision will spit out a table and say, this is how many Coca-Cola bottles there were, this is how many cigarette butts there were. And so we have a website here where, that link didn't work because it's not a hyperlink. Let's see. We have a website. It's on GitHub, so you can go to this GitHub link, and all of the code will be there for you. So I'm going to make another pause here before I move forward and ask another question of the group. What applications would you like to use computer vision or relational databases for? I asked this because, like I said, these relational databases are very basic. They're fundamental. But what we need now, so now that we have these developed, we need users and practitioners, people who actually want to use this kind of tool, to tell us what's most important to do. And so I thought this was a great opportunity. I have all these people who are interested here as a audience, and I'd love to kind of pool some ideas on the applications where you would use computer vision or relational databases in your trash data collection, trash data analysis routines, where you envision it going. And also, if you have any questions, feel free to drop those. Okay. Evelyn has a question about, have you been analyzing the breakdown with the hierarchical graph of plastic? Saw that approximately 56% is plastic. For example, what percentage is bottled water waste? Yes. So there's, what I showed here in this figure is just the material type. We have a separate relational structure for what we call the item type, which includes information like bottle, pencil, cup, like all of those categories have a whole other cluster, a whole other hierarchical classification. And I intentionally didn't put it on this because it's really deep. Like, it goes down 7 levels of hierarchy. And there's like, I think it's like 200 categories or something like that, all kind of nested. So it's just hard to make sense of. But yes, if you go to the trash taxonomy, you can download a relational table, which will be able to answer that question of what percentage of that plastic is bottled bottled water. I think, yeah. Oh, sorry. Any other questions, comments? All right, we got another one. Thank you, Evelyn. Robert of Texas, given current use, they would be interested to know if we have a category for PPE, mask, gloves. So that is a hot topic right now. I'm glad that you asked that. That is a hot topic in trash research. Those categories were not historically listed very often because they weren't being seen in the environment as much. And so now most people that I know who manage these different trash survey lists are including PPE, gloves, masks specifically. And those are, I think that they are currently included in the trash taxonomy, but I think that they could be better described. We need to revisit those because the trash taxonomy started being developed 3 years ago and things have really changed in the past 3 years. So yeah, great question though. Okay, and Michelle asks, I'm interested in applying it on a reservation I work for to identify hotspots of trash accumulation. Yeah, definitely that would be a good use of the trash taxonomy and maybe even the Our Clean Community data visualization portal. Yeah. Yeah, like the Our Clean Community project that I showed earlier. I can share the specific details with that. It's basically, if you have a lot of data in a specific area, it will help you to visualize where all that data is in space. It's a GIS tool. Yeah. Oh yeah. Some more, the chat is great right now. The Taco dataset is a really cool computer vision tool as well. And it does something similar to the computer vision tool I showed, but it actually, our computer vision project only classified trash, not trash. The Taco dataset classifies different types of trash. So they've really done a good job there. All right. Cool. Okay, so I'll move on to the next. Yeah, please do contact me, Michelle. I'll move on to the next project. So these are reporting guidelines. So in microplastics, now we're kind of shifting gears into microplastic research specifically. In microplastics research, one of the challenges is that the field is really new. It's even newer than trash research. And so there's not a lot of guidance on what needs to be reported about a method so that you can reproduce that method. And this has created a challenge for people who are trying to review the literature, who are new to the field, to figure out what needs to be done, what was done well, what wasn't done well. And so we created this reporting guidelines tool, which helps people to navigate. If you're doing field sampling, for example, what do you need to think about? Think about reporting and keeping track of while you're doing microplastics field sampling. When, where, how big was the sample, the location, all that kind of stuff. So this is a cool tool that we think will be really, it's already being used quite a bit in the field actually to do. It's being used as grant requirements. I know some journal editors have reached out so that they're using it to sort through papers for quality, training new researchers. And you can use these reporting guidelines if you're doing microplastics research. I recommend you take a look at these and see how you can incorporate these factors into your data set that you're developing. All right, and then Open Speccy is a project that is for FTIR and Raman spectroscopy. in microplastics research, oftentimes researchers will collect a sample and then they pick through that sample to find all of the plastic particles. But many of the things that they've identified that they think are plastic are not actually plastic. And so what is now the standard in the field is that you do spectroscopy to validate that what you found is plastic. But the software that were available for spectroscopy at the time when I started my graduate degree were $10,000. And I thought, heck, I could probably build my own for less than $10,000 and then give it to everybody else for free. So that's what I did. And that's OpenSpeccy. And OpenSpeccy has been really popular. We have a Twitter following, like 400 people now. I know it's being used a lot in developing countries as well, which I'm quite proud of. And basically you can take, so this is an example of a spectrum that we might get for microplastic. It's a polyethylene spectrum. And you can see here, this is what the spectrum looks like. And what we've done is we're trying to simplify the spectral analysis procedure by using automated techniques. So this is kind of the automated routine that runs to clean up the data. And then at the end, we want it to spit out the right answer 90% of the time or more without you doing anything else besides uploading the data set. And that's where it's at right now, and that's what we're doing for QA/QC is making sure that it's highly validated. And I'll talk a little bit about that too, the validation procedures there. There's 10 publications have used this tool so far. We published our own paper on it just a couple months ago, so that was really exciting. Oh, Raman spectroscopy for environmental analysis, cool. I'll have to check out that YouTube link that Eric just showed. This is just a map, a visual representation of all of the functionality in the tool. It has quite a bit of advanced functionality in it. And we've also assessed, sorry, this is kind of blurry. We've assessed how comparable our tool is to all of the commercial libraries. And we have a lot of functionality that commercial libraries don't even come standard with. So that's kind of cool too. And I just wanted to plug that I'm starting with the More Plastic Research Institute, and I want to collaborate with you if you're doing plastic pollution research. I'm going to be shifting my focus pretty much solely on this data analysis, big data projects, and I'm really excited to continue working with the trash research field. We have a really advanced lab there with a mapping FTIR and fluorescence microscope and clean room procedures for doing micro and macro plastic analysis. We're going to be mostly focused on plastic, but also trash more broadly will be a part of our work. And I'll be developing OpenSpeccy and some of the other things that I've already discussed. Those will be being developed more as part of my work with them as a research scientist once I graduate with my PhD. I'm finishing my PhD in a month, so right now I can't, I'm not working in the lab, but Shelly Moore at this link, at this email address, you can reach out to her. She's the lab manager, and she will help you get set up in our lab if you'd like to use any of those instruments or collaborate with us in any way. And in closing, I just want to say that everything in this presentation is open source. That means if you want the data, the source code, anything like that, let me know. If the link isn't already provided, I will give that to you open source. That means I don't want anything in return besides for you to use it. And even this presentation is open source, so you can. I've shared the link in the chat, and you can use that. Go to that link and share it with others if you'd like. And then I'd love to, if you're on Twitter, reach out to me. I'm win_open data. Sorry. I also manage Speccy and the Gray Lab. And two questions that I have for the group are, how can we improve open source practices in trash research? And what tools do we need right now? Thank you all for your time. Also, if you have other questions that we didn't have time for earlier about other aspects of the projects that I'm a part of, then now's a good time to bring those up too.
So while we're waiting for those, what if you had one wish to solve a problem that you've been thinking about but haven't had the time to address, what would it be?
Thanks. Okay, I'm so glad you asked that question because I've been thinking about this a lot recently. Usually I don't have an answer to that question because I have too many ideas, but right now I have this one idea that I think is really good. So I think one of the challenges with collecting data on trash is that a lot of times we're collecting data that's way downstream of the source. So for example, we might collect data on trash that's way out in the middle of the ocean, far away from land, but all the source is on land. And because it's so far away from the source, the data actually doesn't tell us very much about the source anymore. And so that is a challenge that I have an idea for how we can overcome it. And so I have a couple current projects that I'm doing with this. Is basically we are surveying one of the hottest sources out there, which are roadsides. We know that roads within the world are kind of like one of the hot spots of where litter and illegal dumping happens, along roadsides and stuff like that. And so we're surveying city blocks, basically. Like I have a survey site that's right out my front door. And we're surveying these blocks, and we have this area that we survey every single time the same way. And we take photos of every piece of trash that we find. We remove that trash from the environment, and then we come back in 2 days and then do the same thing. And we count how much trash is generating along roadsides. With this, what we've noticed from the preliminary analysis of the data, that it is spooky how constant litter generation is. It is spooky. It's like if I know it's 30 pieces a day and I wait 2 days, I can almost certainly predict it's going to be 60 pieces. It is constant. It's crazy. And what that means is that this technique could be used to assess interventions. So if we do this survey for 3 weeks or so, we go back, do these repeat surveys, we figure out, all right, the trash generation rate in this area is 20 pieces a day. Then we assess that data, say, okay, it's all straws. What's going on? Like, why is everything straws? Maybe it's the restaurant owners are providing too many straws for people. So we go and talk to all the restaurant owners. Hey, is there any chance that you can change your type of straw or like not provide straws for people unless they ask? And then, so after we've had that intervention, then we resume the survey and assess the shift in how much trash is generating in that area. And what this will tell us is the efficacy of those interventions. And that's what we need. That's the information that we need to solve the problem. We want to stop trash from getting into the environment in the first place. That's the goal, right? So we need to figure out which interventions are the most effective for different areas. And I think that this kind of methodology can be effective in doing that. We're doing our first test of this right now. We have 9 students in the Bay Area that are surveying different locations and testing out different interventions. So we're still in the pilot phase, but I feel like after we get this initial data, it's really going to help us to figure out how we need to advance this method so that we can start asking questions on, statewide scales. Like, what does the state of California need to do to stop trash from getting into the environment? And I think that once we have that kind of information, that is a very powerful tool for making decisions to address this problem. So sorry for the long-winded answer, but I'm really excited about this new project that I'm working on, and I think that's what I would do if I could just spend my time doing anything right now. Yeah, we have the methodology already written up. That's a project I didn't present here because it's not really like a data management database kind of situation right now. We're utilizing the trash taxonomy, for example, like the hierarchical pie chart that you saw. That's part of that project. That's part of that project's data. So if they email me, I can get them the methodology. They could start surveying tomorrow their own, local, their own block, and create an intervention that they think would help, and then see how well it does, and share that data with the world. And hopefully, we're gonna start pushing to get that data into the hands of people that need to make the decisions on these problems. So, oh great, we got another question coming in. Okay, have an RFA out right now for prevention if anyone is working in the Gulf of Mexico area or metro areas along the Mississippi River. Awesome, thank you for sharing that. In addition to data sharing, would it ever make sense to have an open source data collection tool? Sarah, this sounds really interesting, the open source data collection tool. So the Open Litter Map is an open source data collection tool. This one here, this is an open source data collection tool, and they even crowdsourced the development of this portal. I think it makes a lot of sense to have that. Is this kind of what you were thinking, or were you thinking of something else? Okay, Sarah says yes. Data collection open source tools might make data easier to crosswalk. Yeah, definitely. The nice thing about these kind of open source tools too is if you get enough buy-in, it kind of starts to standardize the data, because people they'll realize that, oh, this other survey is just as easy to use, but it gives me more information, and a lot of other people are using it too. I think that is a factor that motivates people to use certain trash survey sheets, is that maybe everybody can when more people are using it, it's a bigger incentive to use the same thing. Yeah, I agree. The costs of hosting these open source projects, Sarah says that they pay for their database, and it's really expensive to host these. Like Speccy costs, it's not that expensive. So it's expensive for a graduate student to pay the annual fees on it. It's like $400 a year, but like in the scheme of things, that's nothing to any like granting agency out there. So that's another challenge within the open source community and open source software development, is that there are real costs associated with hosting these things somewhere. You basically run a computer nonstop to be able to host a website, and somebody has to pay for that computer to be alive and to be used. And so that is a limiting factor. Luckily, it doesn't cost much, but it has been a challenge at times to figure out how we can keep those costs low enough on a graduate student salary. But also, we've gotten some funding for Open Speccy, which has been great, real godsend. I think we're funded now for like the next 3 years or so. So that's exciting. We could even expand it.
Is there going to be, or is there already, the availability for what you've been covering here with data and all these brilliant tools to help us make sense and manage microplastics information?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the trash taxonomy can manage microplastics information. There are hierarchical and alias structures in that data. We haven't specifically built it out yet to be exceptionally good at microplastics, but that is a future project that we're we're going to include. We just need to grab some additional survey sheets out there to incorporate them. Open Speccy. So Wade would not work very well for microplastics because it's mostly computer vision on big trash. And microplastics would just be like a small pixel in this image, so you can't really see what they are. And then, of course, the reporting guidelines and Open Speccy are strictly microplastics, not even very few people would use these tools to study big trash. You probably would just use them for microplastics. Yeah, good question.